All right. Welcome to the quarter. My name is Angel León, your host, and today's guest. He spent about 25 years at the intersection of technology and business transformation in general, and he hosts his own show, interviewing people that are building in AI, and he does a lot of other things in between that. So I'll leave that to him to talk about those things. So Marcelo DeSantis, welcome to the corridor.
Oh, Angel, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be in your show.
Thank you, Marcelo. You were born in Argentina, right? And you came to the U.S. You built a long 25 plus maybe year career, right, across CPG, automotive, professional services, and other sectors. And then you eventually became a senior digital transformation executive at ThoughtWorks. And so, talk about your early beginnings. What did that look like in the corporate world as you were growing your career there? But what was that also that actual turning point, the moment that you knew you wanted to build a career at the edge of technology rather than just inside it?
hmm Well, no, my beginnings, I started as a software engineer, right? I was a programmer. I mean, those times we didn't have AI to code, so have to be 100% of our mental effort, so to speak, right? Writing code, writing lines of code, and I was, and I am still, I'm a sort of a geek with technology. But there was a point in my career when I understood that, technology is great, but if you don't use it for solving real business problems, if you are not able to articulate the business value of technology investment, it was going to be very difficult for me to climb the ladder in corporations. So, I got more closer to business. I finished my MBA, started to have managerial positions in where I was driving large transformation programs where technology was maybe one ingredient of the whole transformation, being the others. Change management, changing the way people work and enabling experiences for customers, automating processes, improving the P&L of companies in manufacturing, in automotive, as you say, in consumer goods, digital marketing, all those things. And up until I joined ThoughtWorks after 25 years in CPG. I joined consulting when I built advisory arm of the firm at the moment, in where basically most of my work, I always like to define it like this. I was the person that in a business meeting knows the most about technology. I am the person that the most about business in a meeting with technologists, right? So I was always playing this bridge between technology and business, and always focusing on value, right? Um, I would say also that secondary effect of that focus of my career, it has been also important to me to get closer to angel investing, right? Specifically these days, in where most companies are, I would say, technology at the core. So I'm using my understanding and knowledge about technology and technology trends to really vet which investments could have some return in a few years from now. These days, that's very difficult to determine, given that some companies start strong and then large AI labs are eating their lunch during a weekend. But I am enjoying the angel investing angle of my profile and my professional focus. So basically, C-suite executive, 25 years of technology and business expertise. Now investing in companies, now helping boards and C-suites to really understand how to use AI to, deliver value above and beyond the hype that we're all experiencing these days.
Very nice, Marcel. Thank you. And And to that, same line of thought, what was it that you saw during your corporate career that made you certain that there was a real gap in capital reaching Hispanic and Latino founders specifically?
Hmm. Well, I think the last maybe 8 years when I spent most of my time in say large digital transformations, and you start to understand when you're in large corporation that many of the capabilities you need are going to be sourced basically from software as a service companies on one side, but on the other side you also recognize that you need to have a sensible approach with startups. Why? Because they are building not only great solutions, but there is so much to learn about how they work, right? Specifically, large companies, when we move pretty slowly at many times, getting the DNA from startups was very important for me and the companies I was working for. So when I started to collaborate with the startups, I started to notice that most of the founders, they didn't look like me, or anyone coming from the Latino Hispanic community. And when you start to look at the statistics, also that tells you also that basically not too much of the capital we raise for startups ends up in the hands of Hispanic founders. So, it was a mix of practical observation of meeting hundreds of founders and startups to help the companies I was working for, and also looking at statistics and research that is, today is pretty much available. So, that was a gap I wanted to help to close, get more founders from the Latino community to be part of the startup growth, and also understanding that the Latino community in the US is a large market, right? And
Mhm.
most of my career has been in consumer goods, and something that I learned from being in consumer goods is that you do need to understand your market. You do need to really understand it to the point that everything you do, the product, the marketing, the go-to market, is actually addressing the specific needs of one specific customer or specific segment. The Latino, the Latino economy in the US is very large, and whoever is running a company and is not looking at that as a business opportunity, I think is missing is missing the point, right? It's missing value, it's missing opportunity, it's missing the ability to sell services and products that can be very profitable.
Marcelo, you spent decades, right, inside digital transformation cycles, internet, cloud, mobile, now AI. What do you think is generally different about this new wave versus the others you've lived through as an operator?
Mm. I think they are all the same except for one characteristic, which is the pace of change, right? I mean, yes, you can argue that we went through the same thing when we started the internet, and then we got cloud, we got blockchain, or we got anything digital in the last maybe 10 years. Uh, AI is similar in that aspect. When you get a new technology, you start to try to understand it, pilot things, fail in some things. You realize that you don't have the talent. You realize that you don't have the governance. You realize that you don't have the ability to manage it properly. These days we're talking about AI costs and invoices getting into the desks of executives, and they don't have. So all of that happened in the previous waves. That's the point. What to me is different with AI is it's very fast. I mean, just look at the last 2 weeks, right?
Mhm.
Only in the last 2 weeks, right? You got news about new models from Anthropic. You got news from the government, allowing or not allowing some models to be used or not being used. You have news today about new legislation, right, being discussed. Then if you go state by state, there is a new legislation or guardrail that is being created. Um, you look at the AI labs, and they're producing new features every other week. And not too many weeks ago, we were talking about OpenCloud or Clobot or whatever is the last rename we got in the market for that product. And today you look at Cloud and Anthropic, and most of those capabilities are already part of that. So it's going too fast, right? And if you do a second exercise, and do you actually remember the day that ChatGPT got into our smartphones? That was only 30 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you
Mm-hmm.
can actually see a before and after that moment, right?
Yeah.
So that's the difference. I think it's going very fast. It doesn't give us the opportunity to learn and adopt and actually think and reflect on how can we use these tools, how do we need to use them, and specifically if you are in board meetings, the question is how do we govern these, tools, agents, AI capability in large organizations, right?
I did a little bit of research, and please correct me if I'm wrong, right? But you've talked publicly about how a single person with access to quality training data can now build something that used to take a whole engineering team. What does that actually change about who should start a company and who shouldn't anymore?
Mm-hmm. I think if I remember what I said on that is basically the moat of technology startups, right? Every time I need to invest in a technology startup, I actually ask myself, is this a business or is this a feature of the large AI labs, right? And if the answer is the second part, it may not be a great investment, even though some of those companies show a lot of, we say, good results initially, right? Then they die, and have a list of them. I'm sure you know all of them. So to me, companies that can actually win with AI in their operating model are companies that have, I would say, huge advantage in regards to data. In other words, what data set you have that anyone else have,
Mm-hmm.
right? And do you actually have the mechanisms to protect, grow, and evolve that data set, right? Because the models sooner or later will become a commodity. The performance of the models, both closed source and open source models, they're going in, always improving, but they're not that far away from each other. And at the end of the day, if you don't have a data set that is unique, that can actually augment the capability of the model, anyone else that can have access to the model will get the same answer or the same results that you get, right? So to me, data for a company, for a startup, for anyone, it's the only thing that is gonna create long lasting value. All the rest, knowledge is has a shorter shelf life than in the past, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you prompt, you get an answer, then it's up to you to use your critical thinking, your judgment to see if that answer applies to your context, to your problem, etc., etc. All those human capabilities that we always talk about. But knowledge, the shelf life of knowledge is very short.
Definitely, definitely. And as an investor, Marcelo, and of course, as someone embedded into looking in startups, how is AI actually changing the mechanics of how you evaluate the deal versus let's say 5 years ago?
Well, I think if you talk about the operating processes within a venture capital firm, most of our colleagues in VC will tell you that they are already using AI for, from exploration, scouting, monitoring, looking for signals from the portfolio companies. Some venture capital firms I work with, they are building the capability not only to embed AI into their internal processes, but also to help the portfolio companies to get access to those capabilities. At the end of the day, it's a win-win situation. They improve their operations and they improve their companies in their portfolio. Again, I think the the big the big differentiator for me in a due diligence process is data.
Hmm.
What data set you have, is talent still, right? As much as we like to say that software engineering is dying as a profession because AI is replacing coders, which is true in a large extent. Great software engineering uh, requires super experts to be done properly, right? And those are scarce, right, these days. So you need to have the data, you need to have talent, and last but not least, there is some mechanism of distribution, so to speak, right? You might have the data, you might have the talent, you might be able to build AI products and services. But how are you going to get to the market you want to target, right? Do you have the expertise, the tentacles to get into the market? I mean, I think distribution also is important. And last but not least, I always ask, sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not, what's the exit strategy, right? Unless you're building the next AI lab, which will require a lot of investment, to be honest, most likely your company might end up being acquired or merged. So it's good to ask founders, if that scenario happens, what is in their mind, because that also tells you if a founder has that strategic thinking you need to have these days, in where you can actually pivot across 3, 4, 5 scenarios at any moment, and always, not having the final answer, but having the scenarios clear. So when you get to the moment when you need to make the decision, at least you have clarity, right? And you're not completely lost. So those are the things, Angel. I think, it's not rocket science,
Mhm.
but data, more data.
Definitely. And this is more of a data and sort of judgment question, right? And another thing that I read about things that you've said before is that data needs to basically be managed properly for AI to become a real advisory seat at the table, right? So what does that look like specifically for a fund or an angel group trying to use AI and diligence, right, without losing the human judgment that actually catches what data alone misses?
Mhm. So if your question is about what kind of data do we need to make solid decisions within the venture capital industry, and I, I I think the data that you can get from any model today, as I said before, is commodity, right? Any VC that is I would say skillful in using AI will get the same signals and data you get, right? I think venture capital and private equity companies that will do very well in the future are going to be more on the side of building relationships with their founders and with the network of investors. And when I'm talking about relationships, I'm talking about this, right? I mean, human relationships, right? Which honestly is not different to what was happening in the past, right? If you just go for a second to the West Coast, we always complain that it's a brotherhood, right? That they well, you know what? We should learn from that, right? And I think as we automate and get signals from AI, which again is going to be a commodity, something that anyone can access, those relationships are key assets for finding opportunities early enough so you can invest, and get good returns, but also to building those relationships with founders. So you not only provide capital, but you also provide support along the journey of growing those companies, right? Every time I talk to a founder and I ask them, do you need money or do you need a partner? And if the answer is money, I say you should go to a bank, right? I mean, get a loan, right? I mean, now if you want a partner, if you want someone that will be open doors for you, if you want someone that is going to connect you with a network that can help you, to grow your organization, to get advice, to develop your capability as you scale up, I'm the person. But if you just want my money, just go to a bank. I mean, it's a better deal, easier, right? And whenever you need additional help, you let me know.
Interesting that, as I feel that as we go into deeper into the AI era, before our human mind was sort of more capable of, and then now it's sort of the other way around. So now we used to look at the tech a lot before, right? And understand
Mm-hmm.
what was that tech stack and this and that, right? And now it's sort of backwards. Now it's okay, forget about the tech. Who's building this? Who's the person behind this? And things have sort of switched places right now. And you said once that the most important part of a pitch deck is basically the relationships. And to that same point that we're talking about, the relationship of founders that they build before they even share that pitch deck. Do you think that AI changes that at all, or does it make those early relationships even more important as the volume of pitches keeps increasing?
Mm-hmm. I think the relationships are much more important than in the past, because the level of ambiguity and uncertainty you have in in these investments is larger than before. I would say, we were talking before about the rate of change, right, and how AI labs are building, features that might be pitched as companies by startups, right, in a matter of days, literally days. Um, you need to trust the person. You're not going to trust someone if you didn't spend time together, right? And trust is something that takes time to be built, and it's not on demand, right? It's not that you need me now and let's do a ceremony so we trust each other, and then after
Mhm.
that we trust each other, right? So
Right.
it comes organically through different interactions. And I'm a huge believer on investing in relationships. I have done that in my career, in my personal life. And, going with an open agenda, just trying to understand the person in front of you, how can you contribute, not expecting anything. Things come to you or they don't,
Mhm.
but doesn't really matter if your outcome is to get to know another person, get to understand what they are doing, how they are thinking, and if you can contribute, great. If a person can contribute to your agenda, great. If any of those, also great. You met a person, and you never know. Maybe in 5 years from now, there is an opportunity to do something together.
So for founders, does that mean that if I want to build something, I should sort of start a lot earlier than I should have started right before, because now AI is making that even harder for me, in the sense that now I had to build these relationships, like you said, even before you start fundraising, so that you come in with that conviction already and those relationships. Um, from the founder side, again, does that mean that it takes longer now for someone to launch something or at least start fundraising?
I think it takes not longer, takes shorter, right? I mean, and the reason is that today you can prototype almost anything in 20 minutes, and have some kind of MVP done during the weekend with a couple of people and a good model, right? So building an MVP is easier. I don't think you need to start earlier. I think you need to acknowledge that building the relationships is another ingredient of building a company, right? If you're starting with a new idea today, what you typically do, right? You set your vision, you start to look at the market, the size of the market, and what kind of product do you want to put into the market, what characteristics are going to be differentiating for you, what's your team. Well, as you already do all those things, right, and you do them faster because AI is actually accelerating all the process. The only thing I'm saying is building the relationships strategically, right? Relationships that are related to the product you're building should be
Mhm.
another ingredient. Actually, I would say you have much more time. AI gives you much more time to build the relationships because it's removing from your lap a lot of operational work, specifically at the beginning. Specifically at the beginning.
You've championed, before the idea that underrepresented fund managers are competitively positioned to deliver strong returns because of the differentiated perspectives and networks that they have. Why do you think that argument still has to be made explicitly now in 2026, right? Instead of just being an assumption?
Hmm. Well, there is. I mean, the elephant in the room is that the current administration is pushing back on anything that has the label of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Underrepresented groups. That's a fact, right? We are seeing that. But I keep saying I'm coming from the consumer goods industry, working with marketers, building brands to specific segments to sell our products. And to me, if I have to build any product or service to a certain community in this country, first I will choose obviously the Latino community because I'm part of it, but not only because of that, is because the growth is really, really exponential, right? And I don't remember how many years are we up to the Latino community to be the largest economic segment of the US, right? So to me, the only reason that motivates me it's to have a place in that business opportunity. And in order to do that, you need to build a team that understands that customer segment because it's very complex, right? When we talk about Latinos in the US, you have, it's a mosaic of different colors, right? You have from Latinos that were born here, Latinos that are immigrants, Latinos that are Puerto Rico, from Colombia, from Venezuela, from
Mm-hmm.
Uruguay, from Brazil. Even sometimes we don't look at the Brazilians as Latinos, but they are, right? I mean, then if you expand the mosaic, you even get into people from Spain, right, that are living here, and the cultures are very. Now, if you're selling a product, it's not the same product to all of those segments.
Right.
And I guess you know that. And I mean, coming from consumer goods, specifically food, I know it's not the same at all, right? So you need to know the segment. And the reason, I think it's just common business sense that we should be discussing in those terms, not in any other kind of ideology or any other thing. It's a business opportunity. You
Mm-hmm.
need to understand the segment. It is growing. Do you want to be part of it? Yes. Okay. So do it.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Marcelo. And you host your own show, like I said at the beginning. And what's a pattern based on the people you've interviewed, right? What's a pattern that you've noticed across those conversations that you feel that a lot of people in venture still aren't paying attention to?
Mhm. So I think one is the challenge of identifying companies that will really have a moat, right? I think that's a challenge. It's not easy. You need to be on top of the news, I would say. But large venture capital firms, they have large research teams, right? Which are sourced not only from AI, but
Hmm.
also from the relationships, from talking to founders, talking to AI labs, right? And being on top of what's happening in the real world, not in the real world that AI uh, send us in our daily summary. I think that's a pattern, distinguishing moat versus hype. Um, the other thing today, you see where the capital is going is basically infrastructure, right?
Hmm.
And I'm coming more from the application layer, right? And I'm very vocal on telling people, yes, we are all excited because we're building data centers everywhere, because we are building new chips everywhere, because we are thinking about energy, which is a headwind, because we are thinking about, even putting data centers in space, whatever you want, right? I mean, that's all infrastructure, right? But if I'm thinking about economic value and if I am, sitting back in my executive roles, my question is, okay, great. How do I use this technology to make my company more effective and more efficient, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's the next chapter for AI, where many venture capital firms are looking at is what's this application layer, right? I mean, is it autonomous vehicles? Is it robots or humanoids, right? Is it in the manufacturing industry also, or are these consumer devices, right? And what does it mean for enterprises? These agents, which I think have a lot of potential. How do we make them not only operational but also trustable, right? Because if we are going to let a machine, AI, agents, whatever name you want to use, to run our operations and make decisions, right? Remember, this is not automation. AI is not only automating processes, it's augmenting processes, which means that we'll make decisions that we typically today we make with people. You have to have the capability in the organization to provide governance to those living machines, right? Living machines means that, they operate, they learn by themselves, they improve themselves. So it's like having an intern day one that you throw them into a business problem and you leave the room and the intern decides to call a customer and close an account, right? Without any context, right? So would you do that? And I think the answer is going to be no. I will surround the intern with, senior people in my organization. We talk about policies, how we do things, our values as a company, how do we treat customers, et cetera, what a strategy. And then, even if numbers say we should close Marcelo's account, maybe we say, you know what, we appreciate Marcelo having a hard time this quarter. We're going to help him. It's an investment. We keep the account open because we see the future in Marcelo's account. But that comes from a completely different place. So that context today is not very clear how companies are providing or will provide that context to agents. And I think for any company, that is the moat of that company. When you get agents across your operating processes, let's say 80% of your operating processes in 5 years from now, the only thing that will be different is that corporate DNA, right? How do you make decisions? Why? Which are your values? When do you take risk? When you don't take risk? All that institutional knowledge, which we call it context memory, whatever name you want to use, that is going to be the moat of any company in a world in where I can see companies are going to be autonomous to a large extent, right? To a large extent.
Thank you, Marcelo. And again, thank you for your time and of course telling you a little bit about your background, your history, and everything you've been doing so far for Latinos in general. One last question that I wanted to ask you is for any founder, underrepresented founder, Latino founder building in AI right now. They have technically access to the same tools that any other maybe well-funded team has, right? What's the one thing you tell them to focus on that actually matters?
I think the first thing I would say is don't fall in love with your idea too much, right? Um, keep yourself open for feedback. Get in front of customers as soon as possible. If there's something that AI is letting founders to do these days, is prototype very fast. Right? So don't spend too much time before you really talk to your real customers and see what they think and take that feedback, seriously. Iterate as many times you can, because that will make your product better, right? When you're investing in a company, the first thing you ask is, did you sell this product? How many times? To what customers? What are they saying, right? Today, all that process is something you can do very fast, faster than before, I would say, and with more frequency. So I do believe that if you focus on customer feedback early enough and the frequency of that feedback, I think you will be able to test your idea faster. And as I said before, don't fall in love with your idea. Just take it as first step, and then adapt based on that customer feedback. Remember, at the end of the day, Doesn't matter if your idea is good or bad. It matters if the customers will love it and will buy it, and will buy it many, many, many more times.
Marcelo, thank you so much. And this is sorry, one last question. Do you think that Argentina is going to win the World Cup?
Well, I answer in two parts. I mean, I would love Argentina as an Argentinian to win the World Cup. You see the jerseys from Messi
Yeah.
behind me. Um, it's a tough World Cup these days, right? I mean, I think Argentina has a great 2022 World Cup. Honestly, there are other teams that, if I look at the games, I follow all the games. I think Spain, Colombia, right? Specific here from Latin America,
Mm-hmm.
France, very strong, right? Let's see. Now we get into the phase in where every match is a final, right?
Yeah.
So as you get less teams, it gets much more difficult, and that you need to be lucky, right? I mean, you can be good, but do you remember the final Argentina France in the last World Cup?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
120 minutes into the game, very 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 far away from the end. If France was scoring that goal, we lost the championship, and you need to be lucky sometimes also.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Marcelo. I really appreciate it. And everyone, this was Marcelo DeSantis, again, longtime technology executives, a host of the tech series, and a million other things that he does in between that. A lot of philanthropy work as well. With other organizations, and appreciate you having taken the time to be here again, Marcelo, taking the time to tell your story. I really appreciate your background and everything you've done for the Latinos, and for everyone listening out there. Know that there's people like Marcelo out there that are supporting others, supporting Latinos. Connect with them, follow their work, do your research, and like Marcelo said, start building your relationships, because at the end of the day, that seems to sort of be the common denominator nowadays in a lot of conversation that I've had, at least for the past year or so. It's always been about relationship, no matter whether you're a founder or emerging fund. It doesn't matter. Relationship is always like the first thing, right? So appreciate it again, Marcelo. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Angel, and thanks to your audience also for the opportunity.
Thank you, Marcelo.